Hello everyone, welcome back. Today we are going to discuss the jewelry heist at the Louvre that occurred on October 19th, 2025. We're going to discuss this largely through the lens of what was stolen. We'll go over the details of how the heist was carried out and what will most likely happen to the jewelry that was stolen. But I think the most interesting story here is that the jewels themselves, the crown jewels that were removed rather violently from the museum. And so you can see behind me we have Marie Antoinette. It's not with a butterfly on her face. This is my Marie Antoinette. And she did not own any of these jewels, but she's a central figure and the inspiration between some of these jewels, particularly those owned by Empress Eugenie, who owned, I believe, the tiara and the crown that was recovered outside the building. So there's a great deal of French history tied to these jewels. And not only that, there's a great deal of history tied to the jewels that the robbers did not take, jewels that would have been far higher in value. So we'll look also at the stories behind those and why perhaps those thieves did not choose to take those particular jewels, like the Regent diamond. And so I have a great deal of stuff for us to look at. We're going to look at a whole bunch of pictures of the jewelry stolen, of fashion at the time of Empress Eugenie's life, some images of Marie Antoinette, who inspired some of this jewelry. And we're going to think about these jewels as artifacts of power. So they were worn to impress a sense of power to the people. And so when we look at these crown jewels, what we see is actually an entire history of shifting power structures and really a battle between an absolute monarchical system and a constitutional monarchy or a democracy or a republic. So you see these shifting forms of government caught in these very expensive, very fine jewels that so often exchanged hands, just as stolen art does. Honestly, these jewels kind of worked in the same way. So that's what we're going to think about today. We'll start with what actually happened during the robbery before we get to everything else. So a lot of you probably already know about it. But this is not the first robbery at the Louvre. The most famous robbery at the Louvre was, of course, of the Mona Lisa in 1911. And that one is actually a foundational theft and a very important historical theft. Not because the man was able to carry it out. The importance of the theft is not in the act itself, but in what the act does to the artwork after it is stolen. And that's what makes the Mona Lisa's robbery so interesting. And that's how we're kind of going to look at this robbery. Is what has this theft done to the jewelry itself and the narrative we tell about these particular artifacts. So we'll start with the Mona Lisa, stolen in 1911. The way that was stolen, I have it written here, was by Vincenzo Perugia, an Italian handyman who had previously helped install the glass case for the Mona Lisa. And he simply took it and walked out of the museum with it, which is something that a lot of great art thefts do. They just take it and walk out, because if we're not expecting to see something, we oftentimes won't notice when it happens. And this is something that art thieves will capitalize on. If you're not looking for it, you will not necessarily see it. And so he took it out, and it took 24 hours for anyone to actually notice that the Mona Lisa was gone, because the Mona Lisa did not have the power it did at that time as it does now. And that is because it was not as famous then, because it had not yet been stolen. It was the fact that it was stolen that made it so famous. And so it was gone for 2 years. And in those 2 years, her face was everywhere. She turned into this, it was like a manhunt, like a missing persons hunt. It was as if a woman went missing. And so people who would not have ordinarily seen that painting or even seen art really at all were now getting replications of that picture all over the place as people were attempting to find information about where this painting had actually gone. And in that way, the Mona Lisa and her frame became iconic. It became an icon. There was something about the woman being removed from her frame and disappearing, especially with that cheeky look she has on her face, that knowing smile makes it look as if she knew something or had something to do with her own disappearance. And so the Mona Lisa would not be what it is today if it had not been stolen. Now, of course, she was returned. She was hidden in the man, what was his name, Vincenzo's, I believe it was, where was it hidden? I think it was hidden in part of his house, like in a false floor or something. He had it intelligently hidden, and he was trying to sell it, and that's when he got caught. And she was returned to the museum. And ever since, she has been an icon in our history due to that disappearance. And not everyone knows that. So that was a Louvre heist. And it wasn't even really a heist. It was just he walked out with it, right? So it wasn't as a violent a break-in as this one was on October 19th. But we want to think about what robberies do to the life of an artifact and to the life of a painting. And particularly now, as politically our world is shifting, and I think we all feel that shift, that there is the rise of a monarchical feel in our governments, at least there is in the United States, a sense of returning to some sort of absolutism in relationship to power. So the fact that the crown jewels would go missing at this time, crown jewels so associated with leadership and power and monarchy, is pretty fascinating, and it can help us think about things in a different way. They can act as catalysts for conversations, which is always good. So, October 19th, 2025, at 9:30 a.m., a museum opens, and a truck, or the museum, it's not a museum, and a truck with a cherry picker pulls up to the Louvre on the side featuring the Apollo Gallery, so it's the side facing the river. Let me shift through some papers very quickly. So 4 thieves, masked and hooded, arrived on motor scooters, and there was that cherry picker there, which is oftentimes used in Paris for putting furniture into high windows. So if you're from the United States, we don't usually see these on the streets, so it would be a bit odd for us, but there, I guess it's quite common. I don't know, I've never been to Paris, so if you're from Paris, let us know. Okay, so they enter the museum by using the cherry picker to climb onto the balcony, I believe, and so they get in through the second floor window of the Apollo Gallery. And they're only in the museum, or the total jewelry heist. Oh, listen. Those are the bells of the Catholic Church. I think they're pretty. I hope you can hear those and we're not just listening to silence. Sometimes silence is good. I love church bells, and when I moved here, the fact that there's a church right next door that has bells made me so happy. There was a church in the last place I lived right next to a church, but they didn't have bells. But that was a massive church. This church is a very petite little church. The church I lived next to was a big southern church. You know how the big southern churches, they had like 500 people, 1,000 people attend. This one is tiny little New England itty-bitty thing. So anyway, we took a moment for the bells. They chimed in mourning for Princess Eugenie's crown jewels. All right. Anywho, so at 9:34, the thieves break into the Apollo Gallery where our jewels are stored through the second floor window. We'll smash the gallery glass with a disc cutter, which set off the security alarm. And so I think they were not interested in staying unnoticed. They were really just interested in being as quick as possible to get away with them. That quickness, I think, implies that they were dropping these jewels off with somebody else, that they were going to somebody else. Art thieves are often very, very good at thievery, but the real art of art theft is how do you monetize it? How do you actually sell these incredibly hot products, essentially? I mean, these diamonds are pretty noticeable. This jewelry is incredibly noticeable. So how do you move it? How do you enter the market that you need to enter? That is an art in itself, and thieves who are smashing windows with disc cutters are probably not the people to do that. So oftentimes they'll be hired to commit these crimes, and generally they're caught. But just because they're caught does not mean that the jewels are recovered or that the lost art is recovered. That's oftentimes made it to its next location or the next person, whoever the more important person who has hired them or whatever to take these jewels. So they smash them, just get them, sets off a security alarm. When the guards arrived, they threatened them with the disc cutter, and they smashed the display cases while the Louvre employees were actually evacuating the museum. And then they ended up escaping through the same window using the cherry picker. And that's when they dropped Eugenie's crown outside the ground where it was found. So they were moving quickly. They were a bit disorganized. They dropped the crown on the ground, but they made it out with 8 other things. The crown was by far the most expensive thing. They left behind the most expensive thing. And it was a bit damaged in the fall, but it allegedly can be restored. So that's good. But yeah, the crown itself was not, it was recovered. They didn't get away with it. And the crown itself, belonging to Empress Eugenie, to give you an idea of what they left behind, had 8 gold eagles, 1,354 diamonds, 1,136 rose-cut diamonds, and 56 emeralds. So all of those jewels would do quite well on the market. And so they left that behind in their quickness to escape. Again, it only took about 8 minutes. So they get out the cherry picker, or they leave through that, and they get on their motorized bikes and they zoom away into the distance, having left all of those display cases now smashed and empty of their fine jewels. I don't know, and I don't think anyone knows yet, whether they were going for specific pieces. Because if they were, they did leave behind some incredibly expensive things that would have been worth way more than what they took. And that is, in particular, the Regent diamond, which is worth millions, right? And is kept in the Louvre in the Apollo Gallery. And so that's one thing that they did not take. And we'll talk about the Regent diamond because that's one of those pieces of jewelry or of gem that is filled with history. And we'll actually start with that one before we move in to the other jewels of the French monarchy. But so that's how they were stolen, and I believe they attempt to set the cherry picker on fire. It's a bit dramatic, but they didn't get to. They were stopped, and so they escaped on a motorbike. Now, 2 people have been apprehended, and those people are not named yet, but let me find where I wrote it down. One was a French Algerian, and he was apprehended attempting to flee to Algeria, and the other was attempting to flee to Mali. Both had criminal records, and they were identified by DNA evidence they left behind, and CCTV, and phone tracking. So it was a messy heist. It's nothing like the Isabella Gardner Museum heist. If you want to know a little bit more about the way that robbers make money off of art theft, or why they might do it, or you should definitely watch that video that went about the Isabella Gardner Museum, the greatest art theft in history, because this still does not even get close, really, to that theft. That theft is worth $500 million. This one is only $102 million in stolen merchandise. So that's important to note. This was not well done. It was brazen, I think. It's brazen. Sometimes we look at brazen acts as incredible acts, but this is just, it was sloppy. So let's see. Yeah, so they left behind at the scene a yellow construction vest and tools. And obviously DNA evidence was associated with those things, and they dropped the Princess Eugenie's crown. I'm sorry, not Princess Eugenie, Empress Eugenie's crown. And so they quite easily found these people, and quite quickly. But as they were looking for these people, many issues with the museum security came to light. So we'll go over this very briefly, because that is fascinating how little security was really there, considering the amount of money that this building contains. I think a lot of times we assume that the sheer volume of people moving through a building would keep it safe, but really it's the opposite. The sheer volume of people is going to make this an incredibly easy target, because people create distractions. Anyway. So, only one camera, it was found, surveilled the entire riverbank side of the museum where the Apollo Gallery was accessed. And apparently, the security camera was facing in the wrong direction, so it didn't actually see the Apollo Gallery balcony at all. There was no camera on that particular area, which one would think is pretty easy to access. Only 5 cameras in total actually watch the perimeter of the Louvre. So it is not well monitored by CCTV. And two-thirds of the galleries themselves don't actually have security cameras in them at all. So this caused a pretty big issue. I think some of the pieces, or maybe all the pieces, I'm not sure, in that gallery actually were not even insured. So there was not a whole lot of preparation for what had occurred, so the people in charge of the Louvre came under fire by the French government and all that, because apparently a lot of energy was being dedicated to hopefully remodeling the entrance and a few other parts of the museum, and that's why increased security, which was known to be a need, was not included. Okay, so that's the issue, that's the failing there. I personally don't, and I'm no expert, but I don't believe that this was an impressive heist. I know some people say that they needed insider knowledge to carry it out. I don't think they did, personally. I don't think this was necessarily an inside job. But that's just my I think if it were an inside job, it'd be a lot cleaner than this. This was messy. So that's my opinion. I know some were saying that it had to be an inside job. I don't think it did. Just comparing it to other art thefts, they're often easier to pull off than they appear, because, again, they feel protected by a sense of safety that's illusory in the case of these art museums. Now, there has been something proposed, and this is important because we'll get to what's going to happen to these jewels now that they're out in the world. The French Gemology Laboratory has proposed that all jewels should be registered in a national bank, all jewels in the entire country of France, because there has been an uptick apparently in museum heists, largely unnoticed. Because sometimes these take a long time to notice, especially if they're taken from places, from storage, where fine things are stored. It can take a long time to notice that these things are disappearing. But this bank will make it much harder for people to resell jewels, which is ultimately what is going to likely happen to these. They will be deconstructed, each of the stolen objects. Their diamonds will be recut by a skilled diamond cutter. They'll be put in new jewelry or sold on the market. And so in that way they can be sold. They don't even need to be sold on the black market. They can be sold in any place, and no one will know that those were actually the stolen crown jewels, especially if they are recut by a very talented cutter. I don't know what the name for that is, but a very talented jewelry cutter. So that is most likely what will happen to the jewels, unfortunately. And the fact that these people have been detained and the jewels are not on them suggests that this is likely what's happening, is they're going to someone else, and then they'll go to someone else, to a few very practiced jewelers. And there are definitely jewelers out there who will work with stolen jewels that can be found. And so this is probably what will happen. But let me get a little bit more information about that. So, now the issue with that is that if you melt down the gold and you take apart all these diamonds, the historical value is actually it adds a lot to this and makes them valuable. That without the historical value, they're significantly worth less money. And oftentimes jewelry, those people who steal jewelry like this don't really care about that decrease in profit, and so they won't mind so much. But there are ways that this will be somewhat possible to spot if they're melted down, because the gold used in the 1800s or the 1700s was far less pure than the gold that we use today, and so that kind of gold would be traceable. We would be able to tell that gold comes from a much older source. And the diamonds are they're likely ungraded, and they're older, so they have different standards than our diamonds have now. And so in that way, it would be difficult necessarily, due to their age, to sell them on the public market. So it is possible that someone wants these in their state that they are in, like in their historical state as historical artifacts. And in that case, there's a chance that they might one day be returned to France, to their home, as the crown jewels of France. We will see, now that they have been apprehended. Who knows what might happen there. But it is likely, again, that they will be disassembled and recut and resold. Now that brings us to what they took and what they did not take. I'm going to start with what they did not take, which was the Regent diamond, which was actually right there. This is a picture of different diamonds, and I'm going to show you. Let's see. The Regent diamond is, it is number 2. So there's the Regent diamond right there. This is a brilliantly cut, beautiful, beautiful diamond that they did not take, which would have been worth millions of dollars, right? But what's the problem with that diamond? How are you going to sell that? It's obviously the Regent diamond. This diamond has been caught in so many paintings. It is well known, incredibly famous, and it's famous for its cut. So it would be difficult to, and practically demented, to cut this down, to steal this and cut it down into smaller cuts, because part of its value is in the sheer mastery of the cut that was done to it from its original larger diamond. But we're thinking about this jewelry as artifacts that contain with them historical story. Historical narrative is attached to these incredibly valuable objects because they are so, I want to say, corrupting. And we see this in literature all the time, like Gollum and his ring. There's so much power in that ring, and it corrupts, right? The Regent diamond is like that. The diamonds in Princess, oh, sorry, I keep saying that. Princess Eugenie and Empress Eugenie are not the same person. The diamonds in Empress Eugenie's tiara, they are corrupting. To possess that can drive a person mad. And so we're going to look at what happened around the Regent diamond, and it's probably good they didn't steal it, because they would have met terrible ends, as most people surrounding the Regent diamond did, due to just its sheer value and the power associated with that kind of value. So let's find the Regent diamond. I wrote all about it. It must be... No. Let's go back. Yeah, I wrote this down because it's a really cool story. It's a sad story. So, the diamond was found in 1698 by an enslaved worker who found this 410 carat rough stone. Was so impressed by it, that rather than turn it over to his supervisors, he hid it in a wound in his leg and smuggled it out. He wanted to sell it in Madras, a bustling market. He found it in what is now India, and he wanted to go to Madras to sell it. So he ended up trusting an English sea captain to ferry him there. And he made a deal with the English sea captain that if he ferried him there to sell this diamond, he would give him 50% of the proceeds. Now, of course, an English sea captain is not going to cut a kind of deal like that with an enslaved man. So he threw the worker overboard and stole the diamond for himself. He then sold that diamond for 1,000 euros to Jachand, to Jachand, I guess is his name. And following that sale, the sea captain ended up actually hanging himself. And no one knows why. It may have been, some say, because of the guilt of what he had done to the man, throwing him overboard for the sake of this jewel. Like the crimes that we will commit and the ways we will act against our own selves for money is sometimes quite astounding. So that is what happened there. It was now known to be stolen property when Jachand owned it, or came into possession of it. And so the governor of Madras, Thomas Pitt, eventually purchased it for 20,000 euros, which was much less than what Jachand wanted for it, which was 85,000 euros. So it was purchased for 20,000. And Pitt sent the diamond currently a rough stone, to London, concealed in his son's shoe heel. So he actually put it in the heel of his shoe because, again, this stone is so much money and it's so amazing that it would drive someone mad. And it's intriguing to me that this is an object that's worth a lot of money. Now our money is so often not tied to objects, right? You make money off of ideas. You make money off of investments and knowledge. So people are fighting for knowledge, right? In a way that we're not fighting necessarily for objects like this. And so the jewel heist is a fascinating return to a time where people put so much importance in the value of objects, which, now in the time of digital currency and stock investments and all of these things, physical objects, gold bars, all of this feels very romantic and part of a past that perhaps is rapidly disappearing. Anyway, he sent it to London to be polished. Joseph Cope, a diamond cutting specialist, cut it down to 140.5 carats in this cushion cut. And so this is the cushion cut for those who are knowledgeable of engagement rings. I suppose you already know this. I'm not. Sad. This is the cushion cut that we're talking about right there, right here. And he did this fabulous cut from this much larger stone. And the main stone, known as the Pitt diamond, was sold in 1717 to Philippe II, who was acting as the regent of France. It sold for 135,000 euros and became known as Le Regent, a symbol of the French royalty. Now, it appeared in several crowns throughout the French royalty, King Louis V in 1722, and, of course, King Louis XVI in 1775. And most importantly, we have here Marie Antoinette. Right? Marie Antoinette wore this in one of her hats, this incredible cushion-cut diamond. And her style and evolution was very influential, both in terrifying the royal family out of wearing their jewels and giving the royal family the spirit or the inspiration to wear their jewels. We'll see that with two very different sorts of empresses in a moment. But during the French Revolution, the Regent Stone, which was between 1789 and 1799, and we all know what happened to Marie Antoinette and Louis XVI during that. Marie Antoinette was, of course, beheaded by guillotine. The royal family was. But Marie Antoinette is probably the most famous, you see here. And that time, the Regent diamond was stolen. And it was found hidden in the roof timbers of an abandoned attic in Paris. So we don't know who stole it, but in the tumult of that revolution, it disappeared. And the diamond, after it was found, was then used as a security deposit, essentially, to finance France's new government, and was held by investors in Berlin and Amsterdam during that investment, until 1801, when Napoleon reclaimed it. And it didn't find its home in the Louvre until 1887. So you can see how this little jewel contains in it the history of an entire, somewhat 300 years of French tumult, French political history, and most notably, political histories are oftentimes just a history of power and the transfer of power. You have the diamond in the hat of Marie Antoinette, soon to be hidden in a Paris attic for years, right after her assassination. And so that Regent diamond was not stolen. It remained there, though it is worth much more than the others. And so did the robber simply not know the value of this? Most likely not. But they knew that moving it would be really, really hard, probably because they intend on cutting the diamonds themselves into smaller diamonds. And it would be hard to do so with a diamond like that, known for its absolute purity and perfection and the exceptional nature of its cut. Okay? So in 1887, it found its home in the Louvre, where it remains, spared from that robbery, which would have been far more devastating than currently occurred. Now, what was actually stolen, you ask? Well, 8 items of jewelry worth $102 million in value. Let me have a drink. And I have pictures. Why are they not in color, you ask? Because I don't have a color printer. So everything's in black and white. It's very retro. That's not the right word. Like an old Hollywood movie. No color. But let's go ahead and look at these. Sorry, I've got a cough. When you end up talking as much as I do in a day, your voice just kind of, it winks out after a while. Okay, so let's see. I have all these beautiful pictures of empresses in these gorgeous clothes. We're going to look at them. But all these gorgeous clothes really inspired by Marie Antoinette, the revival of her style by Empress Eugenie in the 1800s, the revival of the 1800s. This is Princess Eugenie. We'll just jump the gun because I think this is one of the most beautiful paintings I've ever seen. In the picture, her dress is yellow. I would die for a print of this to put on my wall. I would love a print of this painting. It's beautiful. Her profile is exceptional. I don't know if you can see, and the beauty of the background there. But there's her dress, right? The Marie Antoinette style, the 18th century revival that Empress Eugenie brought to us. And there's another picture of Princess Eugenie or Empress Eugenie wearing a tiara that looks just like the one that was stolen. Here, you can see, let's look, it does look, if you can see there, just like the one that was stolen from the Louvre. I don't believe that it is the same one. But you can see her there wearing a gown by a famous designer who was actually the founder of haute couture, Charles Worth. She's wearing one of his gowns, and we'll talk about that because this is a really, really powerful portrait here, and the fact that this is so like what was stolen, I think, is a good connection. But let's get to what was actually stolen. Okay, so I have this New York Times article, and this is what we're going to go through. It's going to show us some exciting black and white pictures of what was taken. So this is first the tiara of Empress Eugenie. Who was Empress Eugenie? We'll get to that. But this is the tiara. Okay, you can see here. See, there's incredibly valuable pearls on these crown jewels. Empress Eugenie had one of the most impressive jewelry collections. It was so impressive, and a lot of her jewelry ended up being resold by Tiffany to American women, high society American women. I keep saying that, I'm sorry. Empress Eugenie was really influential in the United States over fashion, and the high society ladies of the time in America all wanted to be like Empress Eugenie. Her styles, the fashion house that she helped Charles Worth establish, one of the first fashion houses, the first fashion house to release seasonal clothing, to use live models, all of this. She was so influential in the fashion world, and how women expressed themselves with fashion at that time, or women with money, of course, as that's what the haute couture is about clothes tailored to you. not clothes that are mass-produced, but clothes that are tailored to you. There's a sense of scarcity there, which is why crown jewels obviously are so fascinating, because these cannot be mass-produced, right? They're unique, they are special, they are art. When that mass production happens, the value of art changes, certainly. But anyway, let's get to it. So this tiara went missing, essentially. It was stolen. It was sold in 1887, in an auction in 1887 by the French government to pay down debt and rid the Third Republic of monarchical symbols. So it was actually, they got rid of it because in these republics that would begin after a monarchy is overthrown, these crown jewels would represent so much of the corruption of power that these monarchies would come with. And so there was a desire to rid the French government of these symbols. And so they were sold. But in 1992, the Louvre repurchased this tiara for 1 million euros. Now it features 212 pearls, 1,998 diamonds, and 992 rose-cut diamonds. Now, in addition to this, was stolen her decorative bow, which you can see here. Really, really beautiful. Really, and you can't replicate this, right? That's true art. You can see there. Now, she wore a glittering decorative bow featuring jeweled tassels. It was described as a centerpiece of a belt, although the Louvre's website says there's no imagery of the finished item. This one includes 2,438 diamonds and 196 rose-cut diamonds, and this was purchased in 2008, but it again was originally sold in 1887. Okay. Next, here is another brooch owned by Empress Eugenie. Right here, you can see the enormity of these diamonds. But this is something that someone is going to want, right? And going to want to pay for. So, this one includes, it's the brooch, includes 2 enormous diamonds, as you can see in this. Enormous diamonds that were gifted to King Louis the 14th. Right, he lived from 1638 to 1715, so these are quite old, and he established an absolute monarchy in France. And so this grandiose style of jewelry here that we see is associated often with absolute monarchy. It's intended to create and to show a sense of power, and almost like a deification of a person by these extraordinary jewels that they would wear in official tours. So these 2 massive diamonds were gifted by Cardinal Mazarin, chief minister to Louis the 14th. So that's where those come from. And this brooch was, of course, Empress Eugenie's. So it possessed these diamonds and displayed these diamonds from an absolute monarch, which is something that Eugenie would have wanted to present to the public, which is this desire to return to hereditary monarchy, as Empress Eugenie supported, even as she was a somewhat progressive figure in relationship to women's rights, which we'll get to. So there's another image which shows again that revival of the absolute monarchy and the styles associated with absolute monarchy, which is garish, enormous diamonds, like the Regent diamond, which perhaps the curse of the Regent diamond sent Marie Antoinette to the guillotine. Maybe, who knows? Then we have the sapphire tiara, necklace, and earring. This one right here, as you can see, only 1 earring was stolen. Tiara and necklace, which is odd. So that is a sign that these are not going to be kept in their original form. The fact that they only stole 1 earring. But one earring is, what are you going to do with that? So yeah, this will likely be broken down and recut and resold, which is a shame for those who love the artistry in these pieces, not just the history, but the artistry associated with them. So this tiara and the set contains 24 Ceylon sapphires, 1,083 diamonds, and a necklace includes 8 sapphires surrounded by diamonds and intricate gold settings, and a pair of sapphire earrings. And this is actually worn by Queen Marie Amalie, the wife of Louis Philippe the First, and we'll talk about her later because she's the opposite of Empress Eugenie and did not like to wear any jewelry in public, largely because she was 11 when Marie Antoinette, her aunt, was killed. And so you can imagine a child who watched her aunt guillotined by the public for her wealth would have made her terrified, or perhaps even understanding of why wearing these crown jewels and flaunting them in the faces of those who could not ever possess that kind of wealth was an irresponsible decision. And so we'll talk about Marie Amalie because these jewels taken that belong to her have a very interesting story behind them as well. And then we come to parts of Napoleon's emerald wedding gift set. Empress Josephine was his first wife, and this was not for his first wife. He left his first wife because she could not bear him a son, and he remarried, though when she died, it was said that Napoleon was absolutely devastated, which suggests that he loved her dearly. And his remarriage to Marie-Louise, his second wife, in 1810, was most likely a political marriage due to create stability in the region, and not out of love, which is perhaps what his marriage to Josephine really was. So these emerald wedding gift set was given to Marie-Louise on the day of their marriage. And this one includes 32 emeralds, both pearl and lozenge shaped, as well as 1,138 diamonds. And it includes a set of emerald and diamond earrings, which the thieves also stole. They took both of those. So those are the items that were stolen. Now let's consider the history behind them, the figures behind them, and what their robberies kind of symbolically represent. Again, I don't feel that this was a politically motivated robbery. I don't think this was a robbery that was intended, like others, to be appreciative of art, people who appreciate or want to liberate art, which is for some people a motivation. I don't think this was like a test of one's capabilities. I don't think this was an artful art theft, but rather a brutal theft solely for a commodity, which is why we could more properly call it a commodity theft than an art theft, just because the signs are pretty clear that these will be recut and destroyed. They won't be destroyed, but they will be permanently altered into a new form. So, if you're going out to buy a very fancy $400,000 necklace, make sure that some of the French crown jewels are not in it before you buy it. Okay, so I'm going to do that all night. Empress Eugenie. Okay? Princess Eugenie is a different person. Empress Eugenie. Okay? What a woman. Here she is. I'm just going to show this again because I find her beautiful. And so did her husband. So let's get to... That's Marie Antoinette. Look at that. Oh, it's the same painting. But let's get to our darling Louise. I'm sorry, Empress Eugenie. Or should we start with Mary Amalie? Let's start with her because she comes first in the line. Where is she in my notes? Let's find her. Okay, here we go. Keep going, keep going. Keep going. Keep going, Eugenie. We don't want to get to you yet. Marie Amalia. She reigned from 1830 to 1848 until her husband, King Louis Philippe, was overthrown. She did argue when they were overthrown. I'm sorry, did I peek the microphone? She did argue when they were overthrown that King Louis Philippe should not abdicate the throne and that he should hang on, which is interesting because she didn't want to be queen at all. She actually thought it would ruin their family and make their lives very difficult. And when she was ruling, she ruled very thoughtfully and very kindly, right? And this, again, is largely influenced by the fact that she was alive for Marie Antoinette's death, and she watched her mother mourn the death of her sister, and she was often gone to church to pray for her dead sister and for France. And so she would have likely been frightened of that concept, and it would have been a terrible pain for her, and the crown jewels certainly would have represented that. So she never wore the crown jewels in official portraits. She thought it would be bad taste, and many at that time thought it would be bad taste. They were, Marie Amalia and King Louis Philippe, part of a constitutional monarchy, which meant that they were, figureheads to an extent, that they ruled with a constitution and also a parliament. And to wear the crown jewels at that time would have been in poor taste, and it would have also been particularly dangerous since they were aware of the capabilities of the French people to rise up against displays of excessive affluence in the face of extreme poverty. So she tended not to wear them, and actually she much preferred sentimental jewelry that would contain locks of her children's hair, for instance, and she would often wear these rather than these crown jewels. So she lived a rather modest life for a queen and donated much of her money to charity. So she was a very different sort of woman, and this was a very different time for France, where everyone was very skeptical of the crown jewels and what they represented. And there was a memory, being it 1830, a memory of the late 1700s when Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette met their terrible ends. So those crown jewels that were stolen, she would have never really worn. They would have been in her collection, but very rarely would she ever wear them, except for the most ceremonial of occasions. But Empress Eugenie comes later, after Maria Amalia, and she has a very different idea of the monarchy and how the monarchy should be. And so let's see. Eugenie was born in 1826 and lived till 1920. She was the youngest daughter of the Count of Tiba, so she was Spanish. And her father collaborated with the French during the occupation of Spain by Napoleon's armies in 1808 to 1814, which made her father a bit of a controversial figure in Spain. And so they had to actually relocate to Paris in 1834, where she received her education, influenced by actually Prosper Mérimée. I've never heard of him until today. Which rhymes. He is the pioneer of the novella, so I have to get his books and hopefully bring them to you, because I love novellas and I didn't know there was this French writer, so I'll have to look into that. But she received an excellent education there. And she was also astoundingly beautiful. That's something we must remember. Known for extraordinary beauty. If I can find this painting that I love of her. Again, here. I really wish you could see the color of this painting. It's exceptional. I'm wondering if I wrote down where. Apparently it's in the mat, but I don't remember seeing it. Franz Xaver Winterhalter, the Empress Eugenie. I guess that's who painted it, Franz Winterhalter. Yeah, so I definitely, if I go into the mat, look for this one. It's absolutely amazing. I need to get a poster of that. I don't think I can afford the original, but who needs it? It's more trouble than it's worth. I just let it get unfaded. Alright, so let's see. She meets in 1849 Napoleon III, who was elected to the presidency of the French Second Republic in 1848. But this was a semi-presidential presidential regime, restricting the president to a single term. So Napoleon III was only intended to serve one term. But Louis Napoleon overthrew the Republic in an 1851 coup, creating the Second French Empire. And over the Second French Empire, and it is then, after he has done so, in 1851, that he marries Empress Eugenie. Now, Empress Eugenie, he married largely because he loved her. He admired who she was as a person. He thought she was beautiful. He thought she was smart, well-educated. But she was not considered to have the proper social standing. And in fact, she was considered a bit too outspoken. She supported women, wanted women's books to have value, wanted women to be able to get university degrees. So she was very, very supportive of women in the country, but oddly at the same time, an extreme supporter of the hereditary monarchy. So in a lot of ways, she was very pro-woman, but also very supportive of the monarchical system, and supportive most of all of Marie Antoinette. And also in all of the things that Marie Antoinette used to exude her power. And there is certainly an argument to be made that Marie Antoinette was a patron to the arts and did good with her love of art. She would support, Marie Antoinette would support female painters, and her main portraitist was a woman. She supported arts, and Empress Eugenie wanted to do the same thing. So we could argue that even though Empress Eugenie was a huge supporter and proponent of a hereditary, highly Christian monarchy, at the same time she was very, very supportive of women and believed that they should have rights in the country. Okay, so she married again in 1853. And so she also helped shape the role of Marie Antoinette as the martyr queen, which means that she died for the sake of the arts, and it really focuses on the stoicism that Marie Antoinette exemplified as she faced the angry mob. So she represented the stoic nature, the calm, otherworldly nature of the hereditary of the monarchy, and so this is something that Empress Eugenie admired and attempted to recreate in her own court. So she really revived so much of the 18th century styles that Marie Antoinette brought forth with her luxurious outfits, her extreme decorating styles, these kind of opulent shows of wealth that I think, particularly in the United States, we're actually seeing a desire to represent these opulent shows of wealth. And when you think about these opulent shows of wealth being really a representation of a monarchy's power, as it was in France, it is certainly not to represent the affluence of the population or the state or the country as a whole. These shows of power were entirely, these crown jewels, were entirely based on the power of the monarchy and the individuals who possessed them. So in the United States, when we look at the building, for instance, of a enormous ballroom, right, that is the history behind such spaces. These are not people's spaces, right? These are spaces designed to support the power of the single monarchical ruler. And so that's why I think in the United States now you see these uprisings related to worries of a king, right? Someone who rules and uses lavish shows and of opulence to argue for his own superiority. And so that is definitely what these jewels were used for. They were expressions of power. And Marie Antoinette, being a woman, would have been very intentionally doing that, expressing her power with clothes. And Empress Eugenie wished to do the same thing. And it was also exemplifying Queen Josephine, Empress Josephine, who would have been her husband's grandmother, bringing back that time, that support of the arts that these queens offered. So, Empress Eugenie again had one of the largest jeweler collections, but she was also a fashion icon and really one of the last royal members to influence fashion on that large a scale, and we haven't seen anyone do that since Empress Eugenie. She is credited with helping to found haute couture. So I struggled with that. Haute couture. There we go. This expensive fashionable clothes produced by the leading fashion houses. And she did so with Charles Worth, who was a designer that she loved and she worked with closely. She was known as kind of the Empress of oh, here it goes. Crinoline, I think. I can never remember. Crinoline. They were those like wire cages that women would wear, would make their dresses all puffy. So she liked that. But Charles Worth and her as well, they began to move away from the circle puff, right? So that when you look at the woman's skirt, it's just puffy all around. And they began to think about together a more sustainable, wearable fashion for the everyday, which meant moving the puff to the back. So there's only the back puff and no front puff. And so you'll see that in some of these gowns. You see this? Full puff. Got puff in the front, got puff in the back, very low to the ground, hard to walk. So Charles Worth and she began working together to create very different types of gowns, where they gradually became more shaped in the front to the natural body of a woman and much more puffy in the back. And so Charles Worth actually ended up really reshaping, this is a good example of it, right? Reshaping women's dress, reducing the amount of fun ruffles, and getting more interested in the shape, like clean lines, very clean lines in the finest materials and embroidery. So the details were important, less showy, and more about the architectural structure of the woman. All right, so this is what you see. This is one of his dresses. And Empress Eugenie supported this and loved his dresses. And she, being the fashion icon she was said never to have worn dress twice. And she would often wear one dress in the morning, one dress in the midday, one dress in the afternoon, and then one dress at night. It's 4 different dresses in one day. And that was the sort of queen she was, very much trying to emulate the excess of Marie Antoinette to show that power and that love of fashion and the love of the arts. But working with Charles Worth meant that he began designing these fashions kind of inspired by Empress Eugenie for all kinds of people. And so you see, this is a gown that he made for, who is this? There it goes. I've been filming a whole hour, haven't I? There's another. Church bells. Who is this? Oh no. I don't know who this is. It's not Empress Eugenie, but I should have printed the name. But here is a dress by Charles Worth, specially designed for this woman, obviously of the aristocracy. Absolutely beautiful. You can see the puff in the back and much more straight in the front. This is obviously a ball gown, so it's going to be much more, much different than a more wearable style like this one, which is certainly more wearable, more doable. Okay. But he began to release seasonal collections, and Empress Eugenie's face was all over America, all over the United States, and she became a representation of seasonal seasonal styles, which Charles Worth really helped pioneer along with her, which is the idea that you have summer styles, and you have fall styles, and you have winter styles. And if you speed that all the way up, now here we are in the fast fashion world, blowing through styles because of Charles Worth and Empress Eugenie, the woman whose jewels were stolen, right? So it's fascinating how our lives are so connected to history. But that's one dress, and here's another. Again, I wish they were in color. This is Empress Eugenie wearing another gown by Charles Worth. This is 1853. What happened in 1853? Were we listening? She married her husband, so this is around the very early moment of her reign. And you can see again the puffiness of the back, really moving the body of the dress to the back and staying slimmer in the front was the main change. It's said that Charles Worth really worked to actually change the shape of a woman by changing the shape of her clothes. I don't often think about that, but our clothes so often shape us as women. And so how the clothes are structured is oftentimes how our bodies end up being structured, which is complicated, of course, very complicated. Okay, but let's go now to the final Charles Worth gown that I have. It's just beautiful. This one is maybe my favorite, and a very good representation of the changing shape of a woman. You see her hands clasped there, but how slender this dress is. The body is gone. She's very slender, and it accentuates her arms, her shoulders, and the natural form of her body. And you can imagine there's some shape in the back that we have not yet seen, but it really is abandoning the oh no, I can't remember what it's called. Abandoning the... Oh no, I'm sorry. The crinoline. There we go. Abandoning the crinoline. First being a major proponent of it, Empress Eugenie wore crinoline, the queen of crinoline, and then moving away from it and reshaping to be more structurally focused on the natural effect of women's bodies. And in the point of that was to make it more wearable, and of course make it more wearable because it was being produced and marketed to women overseas who wanted Charles Worth dresses. They wanted these dresses from the fashion house. So in that way, she really established our fashion industry as we know it today. Charles Worth, first person to use Louvre models, first person to establish a fashion house, one of the first at least, and one of the first people to introduce the seasonal collection. Really brought to the level he was because of his association with Empress Eugenie, the last royal fashion icon of her scale. Now, what happened to her? She ended up living in exile in London, I believe. Let's see what happened to her. House of Worth closed in 1956, so it lasted a very long time. But, here we go. Yes, they were overthrown during the Franco-Prussian War in 1870, and she lived out the rest of her life in exile. I think she lived 16 more years after her exile. But she was, in a lot of ways, a very extraordinary woman, but of course very, very flawed if you think about her relationship to power and how she thought it should be maintained. But that is the story of those jewels, and the way in which they represent so much of French political chaos, and they represent the attempt of a monarchy to stay in power when the crown jewels disappeared from view in order to protect them, or when they appeared in order to establish and remind people of their divine superiority. These crown jewels are so much a part of that. Now we don't know what will happen to them. I think there is a likely answer that they will be destroyed. I keep saying destroyed. They're not going to destroy them. They're going to repurpose them and resell them. But hopefully having detained two of the supposed robbers, they haven't been proven guilty, there's a lot of evidence against them, they will lead investigators to the jewels before they can be recut, because recutting these diamonds is an incredibly difficult process, and one must be very skilled to do it. So there are many times where those involved in a robbery can use knowledge of where the piece is to receive a much lesser time. So the fact that these people may talk is very possible if the proper things are offered them. But that's the story of the Louvre Heist. It's a fascinating one, very different than a traditional art theft in that it is a commodity theft. But still, the jewels represent so much of history and power, and the way it shifts hands, and the way it can be so dark and yet so inspiring. So, thank you so much. I hope you have a wonderful night, and I'll see you soon. Bye.